Hello, and welcome back to the Outgrowth Deep Dive series. We're taking a look at each of Outgrowth's 5 sample processing engines, and today we're going to look at Radiate, which is an additive re-synthesizer. Before I talk about what Radiate actually does, I want to give you some context for the samples that I have loaded. These are piano samples by BlankFor.ms. So, pretty basic piano samples. So, when we enter the Radiate engine, Outgrowth is going to analyze the primary frequencies in the sample. It is going to figure out, like, oh, this has, 400 hertz, 800 hertz, 120 hertz, like whatever. It is going to figure out what are the primary frequencies in there. And then it's going to map a sine wave to each of those frequencies. So rather than playing the sample back, we're going to play a bunch of sine waves that are tuned to the most relevant frequencies in the sample. Let's just hear how it sounds. So right now we are hearing 25 partials. A partial is basically a sine wave with a certain frequency and a certain amplitude. And what Outgrowth is going to do is it's going to figure out what are those frequencies, how strong are they relative to each other, and map them each to a sine wave. So right now we're hearing the maximum number of partials, but we could turn it down. All the way down to 1, where we're really just going to hear one sine wave. But if we want kind of a more accurate representation of the original sample, you probably want to turn partials up or leave it at the maximum value. So I think this is already fun because we've got this kind of really unique synth right off the bat, and it's influenced by whatever sample you put into it. So we have 2 more controls for kind of manipulating how we are analyzing this sample. So we have this start point and we have this window size. By default, we are going to analyze the entire sample, figure out the relative proportions of all of the frequencies, and assign our sine waves. However, we can kind of target our analysis to different parts of the sample. For example, maybe I want to really target the first section of it, which looks to be kind of where the meat of the tonal content is. But what happens if we explore whatever this is at the end of the sample? There's going to be a lot of noise, a lot of tape noise, and a lot of just cruft back there. So Outgrowth has identified some frequencies there, but they're much more kind of inharmonic than the start. Yeah. So that's already like just a fun way to kind of explore this sample. We can kind of walk through it if we want. This is really fun to modulate, I think. Let's try that. Let's stick an LFO on the start point. So that's super fun, I think. I also really like using, maybe an ADSR on there. So I'm going to take our secondary ADSR. I'll drop its sustain level. So we're just kind of like quickly, like just decaying away. I'm going to assign that to the start point. And we're basically going to snap deeper into the sample and then return back to the initial point in it. If we make that more percussive, we can kind of get this, it's almost like a bell or, you know, a glockenspiel or something like that, because we are kind of traversing into the inharmonic part of the sample and then snapping back to the part that's more harmonic. So that's pretty fun. You could also totally do the opposite if you wanted. And another thing we could do is we could almost scan through the sample as if we were still kind of playing it. So I'm going to define an envelope which is just going to have a long attack. Let's say a long sustain. And as I hold a note, let's speed up the attack and let's increase that. So that's fun because we can kind of like almost, you know, we're not really playing back from the sample, but you can kind of traverse through its natural contour, which is kind of cool. Another thing I really like using this on is more complex samples. I'm going to pull up something that has multiple notes in it. Yeah. So let me flip back to stem so you can hear this. This is a sample that has a few piano notes in it. So if we put that into Radiate, and then we kind of, we're still modulating. If we modulate the start point, we are going to kind of explore different notes, because Radiate is going to pick up on all of the frequencies that are in this sample. But there are different frequencies at different times. We're playing different pitches at different points. So as we traverse through it, we're actually going to pick up on those different tones. So this is a really cool way to just kind of explore a sample in a different way. We're really just navigating its frequencies rather than, playing back from the actual sample. And I think that is super unique and fun. And another thing I really like using this mode for is for chords, actually. So let me see if I can find a chord really quick. Chord cloud. Sounds like chords. Again, let's hear the original sample here. It's got a few different notes in there. So when we flip into Radiate, we're actually going to hear multiple notes in there. Here, I'm going to find something that has even more chordal content. Let's flip over to a Matt Lowry sample. All right, here's a sample that's in A major. You can hear it's got all kinds of tones in there. So if we go to Radiate, you can hear the major chord in there, which is super cool to me. Okay, so the last thing I want to cover is this cross-mod option, which you might be wondering what this is. This is basically going to introduce a little bit of basically like kind of ring modulation, but kind of like amplitude modulation. Basically all of these different sine waves are going to start amplitude modulating each other, which is very interesting. At lower levels, by default, there's just a little bit. It's just going to add a little bit of grit. If you want pure sine waves, just turn this off entirely. But a little bit just adds a little bit of grit. Up to insanity if you want. So this is really nice just for adding, you know, a unique timbre here. It gives the filter something to chew on, which is nice. Especially if you want to use resonance. Which is super nice, I think. And I also really like kind of having the cross-mod available as a modulation destination, because we could do something like this. We could take our second ADSR. Again, I'm going to set it up to be really plucky. And let's put that on cross-mod. Now we can just get a little bit of a tack, a little bite on each note. Which I think is super fun because, you know, we're not like opening the filter, we're actually adding distortion, which is just cool because rather than kind of like having a bunch of harmonics and taking them away, we're actually adding harmonics, which is a fun concept, and something that I really like exploring. Another thing you could do is maybe put the velocity on cross-mod. So the harder you play a note, the more distortion you're going to get. Which is just a really nice natural sound. It kind of approximates a lot of real world instruments. If you think of like overblowing a saxophone, the louder you get, the more distortion you're going to incorporate into the sound. Same with singing. So I think that's a nice option to have, and it really responds well to modulation, which I think is pretty fun. Okay, I know that I said that was the last thing I was going to say, but there is one more thing to cover actually, which is that in the settings menu, we have an increase stereo option. When this is enabled, we're going to randomly pan our partials around for each note. And that means that they're just going to create this stereo spread. And that spread is weighted by their frequency. So our lower notes can't deviate very much, but our higher notes can get super wide. You should know that, you know, this might have strange effects on your mix. We do use an equal power panning algorithm. So, if you sum back to mono, it should be fine, probably. But you should know that increasing the width and stereo of things can have strange effects on your mix. But if that's what you want, if you want like, a gigantic pad that's doing interesting things, this is probably where you want to look. So that is the Radiate engine. It's one of Outgrowth's 2 synthesizer engines. It's one of the more abstract and more complex ones. It's got simple controls, but what's going on under the hood is a little heady. So hopefully that made sense, and I would definitely encourage you to play around with this algorithm. If you just kind of want to take a sample and completely reimagine it, maybe you like the timbre of a sample, but you just want it to go in a different direction. So I would definitely encourage you to check out the Radiate engine, and I'll see you in the next one.